One brave guy charged forward with his staff, ready to take on the beast, but before he could even swing it, the creature's sharp fangs chomped down on him from head to toe. The leader was lucky and dodged the attack just in time. However, instead of keeping up the fight, he suddenly jumped off the side of the bridge, like he thought all hope was lost. As he hit the water, a huge splash erupted, and he started swimming super fast towards the other side of the lake. Luckily, his gear wasn't heavy enough to drag him down, so he didn't have to worry about sinking. This was a big relief for the mage, and he took off like a shot from the bridge. But just as he was getting into a rhythm, a massive shadow loomed underneath the water. Suddenly there was a loud splash, and the leader vanished beneath the surface. The only sound was the bubbles rising from the shadow as it sank deeper into the water. Just before it disappeared, a faint red glow flickered to life from below. Kirito's demon didn't even notice its enemy had fallen. Instead, it picked up its last victim and lifted him high in the air. The victim let out a terrified scream as the demon pulled him apart like a rag doll. Lifa was shocked into silence by the brutal scene unfolding before her eyes. She stood frozen, unable to move or speak. But then she snapped back to reality. "No, Kirito, don't kill him," she yelled, sprinting towards Kirito. Yuri, on the other hand, seemed completely unbothered by the bloodbath. She casually commented on how impressive it all was, as if she were watching a movie. The demon suddenly stopped and spun around, dropping the salamander's body in midair with a disgusted grunt. The mage crashed onto the bridge with a nasty splat, and lay there writhing in silent shock. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Lifa placed her katana in a very uncomfortable position between his legs. As the tip scraped against the cobblestone, he began to shake. "I want some answers," she shouted, trying to sound as scary as possible. "Who told you to do this?" But instead of intimidating him, her fierce growls seemed to snap him out of his daze. The guy's face turned white as a ghost. "Just go ahead and kill me," he shouted. But before anything else could happen, the demon that had been lurking around started to disappear into thin air. It turned into a dark mist, and then a small figure dropped out of the cloud onto the bridge. Lifa looked up to see Kirito emerge from the mist with a big grin on his face. "That was an awesome fight," he exclaimed, stretching his neck and putting away his sword. He walked over to the stunned salamander guy and patted him on the back. "Hey, you were pretty tough," Kirito said, still chatting away with a smile. The salamander guy just stared at him, confused. "Huh," he muttered. Kirito kept talking, his voice light and happy, like they were old friends or something. Kirito thought their plan was pretty cool. If he were by himself, he wouldn't have stood a chance. Just then, someone said, Kirito." But Kirito wasn't having it. "Hang on. I've got this," he said with a wink at Lifa. Then he turned to the other guy and said, "Now let's talk business." Kirito opened up a trade window on his screen and showed the man a list of items he was willing to swap. "Check out all the cool stuff I got from this fight. If you answer a few easy questions, I might just give it all to you. How's that sound?" The man's eyes widened as he stared at Kirito's big smile. He looked around, probably making sure his salamander friends weren't coming back anytime soon. They would have been sent back to their safe spot by now. When the man turned back to Kirito, he asked, "You're serious?" Kirito nodded, totally serious. The two of them exchanged sneaky grins. Lifa let out a frustrated sigh and muttered to herself. "Men." Yui, who was sitting on her shoulder, whispered, "It's pretty disappointing, isn't it?" The two men seemed happy with their deal and didn't even notice the grossed out looks they were getting from the women. The salamander guy just kept talking. "So earlier tonight, Gitax Mizar squad leader was. I got a text from my friend telling me to join the game. I was in the middle of dinner and didn't feel like playing, but he said I had to be there. So I went online and saw that we were gathering a huge team, over a dozen people. Our mission was to take down just 2 players. I thought it sounded crazy and unfair. But then my friends told me who those 2 players were, the ones who beat Kagumune the day before. That changed everything." "Who's Kagumune?" I asked. My friend filled me in. "He's the captain of the Lancers. A big deal." "So you're the guy who's really good at catching sylphs. But yesterday you got beat up and had to run away. That was you, right?" Lifa looked over at Kirito and made a face when she heard the term sylph hunter. She was probably thinking about the leader of the salamander team they had defeated the night before. Then someone asked, what was G-Tax doing, trying to catch us? It turned out that he was just following orders from someone higher up. You were getting in the way of something, he said, being mysterious. What are you talking about? Leafa asked, curious. The guy just shrugged. I don't know, it's some big deal for the people in charge. They don't tell me anything. I'm just a low-level worker. But I do know it's huge. When I logged in, I saw a massive group of players flying north. Leafa's eyes narrowed as she thought about this. North, she tapped her finger against her lips, trying to figure out what was going on. Imagine a place called Gatan, the coolest city for salamanders. It's located at the very bottom of a magical land, called Alfheim. If you drew a line straight up from Gatan, you'd hit the mountains that are currently towering above. To one side of Gatan is the entrance to a mysterious passageway called the Lugu Corridor. On the other side is a gap in the mountains, known as the Dragon's Valley. No matter which way they went, their next stop would be Almna, followed by the amazing World Tree. Do you think we can take over the World Tree? Leafa asked. He quickly shook his head. No chance. We got burned last time. So now we're being smart. We're saving up our yurd to get super powerful ancient weapons for everyone in our raid team. Everyone's being forced to meet a huge quota. And we're still far from reaching it, someone said. Another person replied. Then they added. That's all I know. You're keeping your promise, right? They asked Kirito this question. Kirito, a Spriggan, smiled calmly, and said, a real man always keeps his word. The salamander's face lit up with excitement, as he watched items and money pour into his trade window. Leafa was not happy with the man, and had some choice words for him. Hey, isn't that your friend's stuff? He asked. Aren't you feeling bad about taking it like this? The guy just chuckled and said, you don't get it. They're always showing off their rare things, so this is even more fun for me. He smiled slyly and added, I'm not gonna keep any of it though. I'll sell it all and use the money to buy something amazing. Like a house. The salamander said he'd take his time getting back, just to let things calm down a bit, and then he took off in the direction they came from. Leafa looked at Kirito, who was acting normal again, and couldn't believe how quickly he had bounced back. Just a few minutes ago, they were in a crazy battle, but now it seemed like nothing had happened. What's up? She asked Kirito. He looked away, scratching his chin. That giant demon was you, right? She said. Kirito nodded slowly. I think so, he said. She looked surprised. You think so? Didn't we plan for the salamanders to freak out when they saw you as a monster? Kirito shrugged. Honestly, I didn't think that far ahead. Sometimes in battles I just react and don't remember what happens. Her eyes widened. That's kind of scary. Kirito nodded. But then he said, wait, I do remember what just happened. I tried out the spell that Yui suggested, and suddenly I felt myself growing huge. Without my sword I had to use my hands to fight. Yui chimed in from her spot on Leafa's shoulder. And don't forget, you were chewing on them too. I grinned, remembering how much fun it was to act like a monster for a change. Leafa looked curious and asked hesitantly. So, did the salamanders taste good? I thought about it for a moment before answering. Well, they felt kind of like barbecue when you bite into it, and it's a little charred. But before I could say more, Leafa freaked out and waved her hands wildly. No, never mind. In a split second, I snatched one of her hands and pretended to take a big bite. Growls, I growled, making Leafa scream. The water in the underground lake rippled from her loud yell, and then she smacked me hard on the cheek. Oh, I groaned, rubbing my sore face as we kept walking. That was all your fault, Papa. Yui teased. I just rolled my eyes and muttered. Tell me about it. Leafa and Yui were totally on the same page. They both thought Kirito was being super rude. Kirito looked all sulky like a kid who got in trouble. But I was just trying to be funny and make everyone feel better after that crazy battle, he said. Leafa wasn't having it. She closed her eyes, turned away, and started walking faster. Next time you'll feel my sword, not my fingers, she warned. As they walked, a huge stone gate came into view. It was massive, stretching all the way up to the ceiling of the cavern. They finally arrived at the entrance to Luguru, a bustling mining city. Their plan was to hang out here for the night, restock on supplies, and gather some inside information about what's been going on. The surprise battle on the bridge had taken up a lot of time, and in the real world it was already almost midnight. But in Iloilo the day was just getting started. Leafa though had to keep an eye on the clock. As a student, she always made sure to log out by 1 o'clock. Kirito thought for a moment when she told him, then nodded like he got it. As they walked through the gate, they were hit with the sound of clanging hammers and upbeat music from the game's musicians. The city wasn't huge, but it was pretty cool. The main street was lined with rock walls that were packed with stores and workshops selling all sorts of stuff. Equipment, materials, food, and drinks. The place was packed with players, and Leafa saw some really unusual characters, like pukas and leprechauns, walking around and having a blast. So this is Lugru. She said to herself, amazed by the crazy underground hub. She strolled over to check out the cool swords on display, in a nearby store window. Shopping was one thing that could always put a smile on her face. She didn't let even the grumpiest store owners bring her down. As she picked up a shiny silver sword from a stand to take a closer look, Kirito suddenly spoke up from behind her. By the way, he said. She turned around curious. Kirito asked. Remember when those salamanders attacked us? Didn't you get some kind of message then? Her eyes widened in surprise as she spun back around to face him, her mouth hanging open. Oh, she muttered, clearly caught off guard by the question. She blurted out, I forgot, and quickly opened a window to check her messages. But even after reading them again, Rekon's warning didn't make any sense. Maybe his internet connection had cut out at the end of the message, but he hadn't sent a follow-up to explain what he meant. Now she was curious, she'd have to ask him directly to figure out what was going on. Leafa tried to respond, but Rekon's name was grayed out on her friends list. That meant he was already offline. Oh, is he sleeping? She wondered. Kirito had an idea. Why don't you try to reach him when you're not in the game? Leafa wasn't sure about that. She liked to keep her online life separate from her real one. She didn't visit websites for Alfheim fans or talk about video games with her friend Shinichi Nagata. But Rekon's weird message was bugging her. Okay, wait here for a sec, she said to Kirito. I'm going to log off and see if I can figure out what's going on. Watch my body for a bit, okay? And you, can you do me a favor? The little fairy was still perched on Leafa's shoulder. What is it? She asked. Keep an eye on Papa, and make sure he doesn't get into any trouble. Leafa said with a grin. You replied with a cheerful aye. Kirito looked upset. Come on. That's not fair, he exclaimed. Leafa just laughed and sat down on a nearby bench. She pulled up her menu and clicked the log out button. This was her 4th time switching between worlds that day. Shuga's mind started to drift back to reality, feeling a bit dizzy from her long virtual adventure. Whew, she sighed. Exhausted. She rolled over in bed, still wearing her atmosphere headset, and checked the alarm clock. Her sister Midori would be home soon. Shuga thought it would be nice to stick around and say hello. She reached up to grab her cell phone from the headboard stand above her pillow, feeling around blindly with her hand. The phone's screen was part of its outside cover. It suddenly displayed a list of messages she had missed while playing the game. What in the world? She exclaimed, her eyes widening in surprise. There were 12 new messages, all voice calls from someone named Shinichi Nagata. The Amusphere system was set up to automatically log players out if they got super important calls, like from family, the police, or a hospital. Nagata had missed all of Taku's calls so far. But what could be so important that he was calling her this late at night? She flipped open her phone to call him back, but before she could dial, it lit up blue again. His 13th call of the evening. Nagata pressed a button and held the phone to her ear. Hello, she said, answering the call. What's going on? Someone asked. Sagoha just showed up and the other person was clearly frustrated.
Finally.
What took you so long? They said. Sagoha shot back. Don't give me that attitude. I just got caught up in the game, that's all. But the other person was too upset to care. Listen, I have bad news, they exclaimed. Sigurd betrayed us, and not just us, he sold out Lady Sakuya too. Sagoha looked confused. What do you mean by sold us out? They asked. Start from the beginning. The other person took a deep breath. Remember when those salamanders attacked us in the ancient forest yesterday? Didn't anything seem weird to you? Nagata asked, sounding like his usual self again. He had a habit of talking really slowly, which could be annoying. When he called her by her first name in person, she would often tease him into stopping by playfully hitting him. But since they were on the phone, she couldn't do that. And just had to deal with it. It was still hard for Shuga to believe that the crazy thing that happened had only occurred yesterday. It felt like she had known Kirito forever. But when he showed up, everything else was a blur.
Huh? What's going on?
She asked, confused. The air battle was a fuzzy memory. But Kirito's arrival was etched in her mind. Remember when those 8 salamanders attacked us? Someone said, Sigurd volunteered to be a decoy and lure some of them away. Right, another person spoke up. Now that you mention it, he didn't get away from them. Did he? The answer was obvious. No, he didn't. Thinking back, Sigurd's behavior didn't add up. Whenever the group split up, he always made someone else be the decoy. He never let anyone else lead. He had to be in charge. Ah, that's a good point. Someone said, Sigurd was amazing at leading battles, but he was also super controlling and liked to be boss. It wasn't like him to put others first and sacrifice himself. So why would he do that? Someone asked. Nagata scowled, clearly puzzled by the whole thing. Shuga's eyes widened in shock as she heard the news. He's working with the salamanders, she exclaimed, her grip on the phone tightening. This was a huge deal. In the world of Alao, different groups were always trying to outsmart each other. It was common for players to create fake accounts, called spoof accounts, to spy on their enemies. Some players would even make accounts that looked like they belonged to a different group, just to gather secret information. Shuga knew that some of the sylphs in Swilvan might not be who they seemed. They could be salamanders in disguise, trying to sneak into the inner circle. That's why the leaders of Swilvan were super careful about who they let join their team. If someone didn't seem very skilled or active, they wouldn't be trusted with important information. It was all because of the risk of spies lurking everywhere. Not long ago, Lifa wasn't even allowed to enter the Lord's mansion behind the Tower of Wind. But things changed with the arrival of Ale. Sigurd became a big player in sylph politics. He was nominated for Lord in all 4 elections so far. Even though he never won, he always came close. The current leader was just too popular, and Sigurd ended up as the runner-up every time. Despite losing, Sigurd didn't give up. He used his skills to advise the leader, making him a really valuable helper. He was a one-of-a-kind part of the sylph team, and it seemed crazy that he could be secretly working with their enemies. The salamanders, do you have any proof? She asked quietly. I had a feeling something was off, so I used my hollow body trick to turn invisible and follow Sigurd around all day, he explained. His friend teased him, you really don't have anything better to do, huh? The hollow body trick was a special power that only Recon could do, making himself invisible. To use this special power, you had to be a master of 2 things. Super strong magic that helps you hide, and the sneaking skill. Recon got his name from a military term that means exploring and gathering information. But he says it like Recon instead of Recon. He created his character to be really good at sneaking around and finding things, which makes him perfect for tracking down targets during hunts. This guy had some sneaky skills that he used to sneak into Lifa's hotel room. He said he just wanted to leave her a birthday surprise and then leave without anyone noticing. But that didn't go well. He got beaten up pretty badly for it. Nagata kept talking, even though she sounded really frustrated. After what he said to you in the Tower of Wind, I was waiting for the perfect moment to get revenge, she said. I wanted to poison him and be done with it. I couldn't believe my eyes. Sigurd and his friends were putting on invisibility cloaks and disappearing into thin air. You're crazy, someone exclaimed. But I knew they were up to something sneaky. They thought they could fool me with their fancy cloaks, but no way. So, what happened next? They snuck into the sewers. As they walked for about 5 minutes, they stumbled upon 2 weird-looking people waiting for them. These fishy folks had invisibility cloaks too. When they took off their cloaks, you won't believe what I saw. Wait, they were salamanders, someone exclaimed. But how did they get past the guards? The town was protected by special guardians that could see right through disguises, like those fancy cloaks. If the salamanders had walked in wearing them, they would have been stopped immediately. Unless, there was something more to it. Exactly, came the response. They must have had pass medallions. These special medallions were only given to visitors from other groups after a super strict security check. It was like getting a special ticket to enter someone's home territory, And not just anyone could get one. Only the top leaders of each group could give out these special items, and once they were given, they couldn't be passed on to someone else. Sigurd was one of those powerful leaders who had the ability to hand them out. I caught them in the act. Sigurd exclaimed. I overheard the salamanders talking about putting a tracker on you, Lifa. And that's not all. I found out why Lady Sakuya wasn't home today. She was meeting with the Kate Siths in secret to talk about teaming up. Nagata suddenly spoke up. Aha! That's why the flag at the mansion was down. Lifa nodded quietly, starting to understand what was going on. Sigurd's planning to send a group of salamanders to attack the signing ceremony. Sugo's eyes widened in shock. She had thought she was done with all this, but the Sylph territory would always be her home. And Sakuya was a kind leader. Sugo's voice shook as she spoke into the speaker. You should have told me sooner. This is terrible news. Nagata sounded annoyed on the other end of the line. I told you it was bad news when you finally answered my call, he said gruffly. She stopped him before he could complain some more. So did you tell Sakuya? Isn't there still time? She asked. He took a deep breath and started to explain. I knew I was in big trouble, so I turned around to leave the sewer, but then I accidentally kicked a rock. She jumped all over him. You're such a clumsy oaf. What's wrong with you? He just shrugged it off. You know, lately it kind of feels good when you yell at me, he said with a weird grin. She was shocked. That's sick, she exclaimed. So what happened next? Did you get in touch with her? He asked. But then he explained what had just happened to him. The salamanders found me because their searcher broke my hiding spell. I wasn't too scared though. I thought that if they killed me, I'd just come back to life at the tower, and run to the Lord's mansion. But things got worse. They shot me with poison darts. Can you believe it? She didn't have time to think about how this story didn't quite add up. So where are you now? She asked. I'm stuck in the sewer as a prisoner, he replied. The salamanders paralyzed me. I couldn't do anything else, so I logged out of the game and tried to call you, but you didn't answer, and I don't know how to reach anyone else in real life. Oh no, I just remembered, the salamanders told me that the meeting with the Kate Sith leader is at 1 o'clock. We only have 40 minutes left. What are we going to do? Shuga let out a deep sigh and spoke fast. Do you know where the meeting is? She asked. I don't know the exact location, he said, but it's somewhere past Butterfly Valley on the other side of the mountains. Got it, she said. Shuga was determined to find a way to warn them. I have to go, she said, and started to hang up the phone. But Nagata's panicked voice stopped her. Wait, Sugaha. Nagata asked a question that made Sugaha uncomfortable. What's going on with you and Kurito? Sugaha didn't want to answer. She quickly hung up the phone and threw it back onto her headboard. Then she closed her eyes, buried her face in her pillow, and tried to block out the conversation. Lifa's eyes popped open, and she jumped up in a flash.
Whoa, you scared me,
she exclaimed. A guy in black clothes, a Spriggan, almost dropped the weird food he was holding. It looked like a stick of tiny grilled lizards. He caught it just in time.
Hi again, Lifa,
he said with a smile. Kurito and Yuffie chimed in with their own hellos. But Lifa didn't have time to chat. Kurito, I'm sorry, she said looking worried. What's going on? Kurito asked, confused. I have something super important to take care of right now. Lifa explained. I don't have time to explain. I just have to go.